Hey, good morning everyone. In this particular video, I would like to go over one of the important topics if you're studying for especially Azure 300 series exam, either 303 or 304, which is Azure Functions. And we're going to take a look at the official Azure documentation for creating a function app in the Azure portal. Okay, before we start the lab, I just want to go over a couple slides here that I have. So Azure app or function app, this is a part of serverless or a type of serverless computing. Okay, there are multiple different kinds. Okay, and we'll look at all of them in the future videos. But today, right now, we're going to look at Azure functions and deploy a function app instance within Azure, and I'll show you how to configure a couple of the triggers. There are other types of serverless computing available within Azure. You can use Azure Logic Apps, Azure Event Grid, and Azure Service Bus. Functions is where mainly you have your code you have developed using supported languages, and there are tons of languages that are supported. C#, Java, Python, whole bunch. You can do a Google search on it, and as long as you're developing within a supported language, you can deploy your code. Okay, and the serverless computing, this really it abstracts the need of servers or infrastructure and operating systems, so you don't have to worry about where to deploy, uh, what to deploy, how much compute power you need. So Azure is going to provide all that to you, and this is consumption based. So you are not running a virtual machines all the time. Azure will determine when your code needs to be run, and it's going to run for you, and you will only pay for the amount of time it's running your code. For code in the Azure environment. So again, so what is Azure function? It's a small piece of code in the cloud, and you can, once you have a Azure function instance, you can create whole bunch of Azure functions depending on your need, and you can perform different things. Typically, you would write your code so that it executes in every 5 minutes, and your code should not run more than 10 minutes. It has a default timeout, so take a look into that. uh, Again, it supports Windows and Linux deployment, and really you'll be creating different triggers like HttpTrigger, TimerTrigger, CosmosDBTrigger, BlobTrigger, and similar type of triggers. A lot many triggers are supported. uh, and finally, one other thing to note, that Azure function uses an Azure storage account to store any code files. Okay, with that background, let's come back to this documentation, and I'm going to give you this link in my video that I'm going to create right now. Okay, and let's go to our Azure portal. So in the Azure portal, what you want to search for is a function app. You can just type function and the function app should show up, and you just click on it. Okay, and it is going to give you a very familiar experience in terms of how they look like. And you see I have one function already running. Okay, if you want to delete a function, you just click on it and you hit delete, and you get the delete confirm yes. So you just type yes to delete your function. So let's just learn that one. So that deleted my function app instance. Now let's create a new one. So here you can click on this create function app button, or just click on the add button over here. That is going to give you the initial blade that also looks similar to any other deployments. I'm just going to create a new resource group. I'm going to call that function app sample. Okay, now I'm going to say okay, and name again function app sample. no uppercase letters, and just say 1 2 3. This one needs to be globally unique within the Azure environment. So we got that one. Now here you have two different options. You can either publish your code, or you can publish your code within a Docker container and then publish that one. So we're going to choose the code for this particular lab today, and then it's asking you what is your runtime stack. So for this exercise we're just going to stick to .NET Core. Okay, the default version 3.1 is fine for this lab exercise. Region, the default region is also okay because it's okay right now. Then you go to the monitoring, and note one thing: when you create a function app, you must create or link a general purpose Azure storage account that supports blob, queue, and table storage. So you have to create a new storage account, or you gotta add an existing storage account that supports those features. I'm just going to create this storage account. Now next thing that I need to determine whether I'm going to host my app in a Linux based system or Windows based system. Now since it's a .NET application, I'm going to stick to the Windows platform. And next thing that I need to choose is what kind of plan do I need to use. Consumption based plan is going to be built when you have the amount of time your app is consuming, amount of resources. When you are getting requests, when it's not doing anything, you will not be charged. Premium is a new thing, and then you can other thing is the app service plan. You can also use that. App service plan actually deploys, as you can see, a virtual machine, a dedicated, and that kind of makes your function app as non-serverless. Like here you are actually requesting for a server. So let's just stick to the consumption based plan, so we do not have to deal with anything else, at least for this particular lab. Okay, we're going with the simple choices here. Alright, next if you go to the monitoring section, application insight, it's enabled by default, and I would highly recommend that you use it. And here again you can use a new application insights instance, or you can put it in one of the existing application insights instance if you have one. And then go to tags. It's not required, so I'm just going to do review and create, and then I'm going to create this particular app instance. Okay, this deployment does not really take too long, so it will be created, and once this is created, we'll go to that application and do something. While it's going on, since we didn't really end up following anything over here, so let's read what else we could do. So here it states Azure Function lets you run your code in a serverless environment. That we kind of already covered. Without first create a virtual machine. So this is also, we have noticed we did not choose any kind of virtual machine or web application. We just say, hey, just deploy this code, and this is my type of code, and we have chosen .NET. Okay, and here if we follow this article, they are going to create a function, a hello world HttpTrigger function in Azure portal. They recommend that we develop this function locally. So if you have Visual Studio Code or even Command Prompt or Visual Studio, you can go through any of these links and create that application at your local environment and then deploy it. For this one we don't need that. Alright, so let's look at the create app. Here we have selected by resource group. We created a particular resource. We didn't follow the my resource group. We got the code as option to publish. We didn't choose the Docker container, which is similar. Runtime stack, we also chose .NET code, and version we chose 3.1. region we just chose the default Central US. Okay, now hosting, storage account, we created a new storage account. Operating system, we chose Windows because it's a .NET application. And plan, we also chose the consumption serverless. Okay, here you can read this a little bit more. Hosting plan that defines how resources are allocated to your function app. The default consumption plan, resources are added dynamically as required by your functions. In the serverless hosting, you pay only for the time your functions run. When you run an app service plan, you must manage scaling of your function app. So if we were to choose this particular one, we had to go through some more configuration, which we did not do. Okay, so this looks similar, and then we enable the application inside, that also looks similar, and then review and create. So we are over here and we are waiting for this dialog box to appear. Okay, so let's come back over here and look. I have the dialog box. It says my deployment is complete. So I can click on this link, this button right here, or I can click over here. That should also give me the button right there. So let's just click over here to go to our function app. Okay, so we are kind of over here. If you you're going through this documentation in particular. So next thing they are doing is creating an HttpTrigger and then testing the trigger, and we can easily do that from here as well. Alright, so come back over here. So before you do anything, let's review a couple of things over here. It's giving you an application URL. Okay, it's telling us that it's hosted using a Windows system. Here's the app service plan. Then it's giving us the status, location, subscription ID, things like that. Now you can also do your IAM, access control, through here, your security through here, but the main thing that we are interested in is going to be under the functions. So if you go under the functions, you see that I have no function. So my function app sample, this function app, is really a container within which you have to create your own functions. Okay, this is just a container. You really have no functions that is running or listening to anything right now for any events. So let's just create add. Okay, you can also create, develop locally, and you can develop your code here as well. Just let's create add, and you can create multiple functions. So in this one, what I'll do, I'll start with the HttpTrigger. Okay, and function name HttpTrigger1. I'll just call it test HTTP TTP trigger. Okay, and it's an authorization level function, and if you read, authorization level controls whether the function queries an API key and which key to use. Function uses a function key, admin uses your master key. The function and master keys are found in the keys management panel on the portal when your application is selected. For user-based authentication, go to function app setting. Okay, so you have all these different options for authorization level. I'm just gonna stick to function for this particular lab. Actually, let's come back over and see what kind of authorization they're using. Let's see, create HttpTrigger, and they're using anonymous. So just to be consistent, we can also use anonymous in our deployment. Okay, so that's all you need to create the function, and it's going to create a default function, and it's going to give you some default code that you can now take and play with. Okay, so what this is the function now that I have created. Now see, this is function, it's not the function app. So this is your function app. Okay, within the function app, this is your first function, is the HttpTrigger type function. And now if you come down to the code plus test, it is going to give you the sample code that you have. Okay, this is the code. You can change the code, and this is the real part of the function, and here inside this you are doing whole bunch of stuff. So pretty much if you look at it, what it's doing, string name request.query, it's getting a parameter name. So from the web URL, you are sending a name, some data to this particular function. Okay, it's running and it's processing HTTP request, and it's also putting the output to the logger file. Okay, so once we get the name, it's processing the name. Okay, and this is how it's processed. And once it's processed the name, here it's creating a response message that is going to be returned if everything is okay. And what it's going to return, it's going to say hello name, this HTTP triggered function executes successfully. Now how do you test this one? It's real easy. You can click over here to test and run. So here you have post key, you have the master key, so I'm just going to keep that, and query add parameter header, so I don't need to add anything. Here in the body you already see that here I have a name Azure already there, and let's not change anything and just run and see what happens. So first thing it said that it's connected. Okay, and then over here you see the HTTP response. Okay, HTTP response code is 200, that means everything went well. And now here's the response that it created. Hello Azure, this HTTP triggered function executed successfully. So if you come back over here, okay, change this to Ankan, okay, and then run this code, what do you think is going to happen? It is going to say hello Ankan, this HTTP triggered function executed successfully. So other way to run this would be to come back over and go back to your code and test. Okay, just give it a second and get the function URL, and once you have the URL you can just come back over here, directly post in your URL, and you can try, and it says this HTTP trigger function executed successfully, pass a name in the query string or in the request body for a personalized response. And how do you do that? Usually you do that using a question mark and then name and say Ankan, and let's try it out and see what happened over here. It now says hello Ankan, this HTTP triggered function executed successfully. So we have tested this function in multiple ways and it looks like it's working very well. So the other thing you can also look at is the monitor. Okay, in the monitor section it's usually shows what is going on. So if you go to the log, it says connected, and usually the logs would show up in here. So let's just try this couple more times, and what we'll do, we'll go and here we go. So I have done this, okay, from my web URL. Okay, so change the name to something else, Basu. Okay, so this has changed. So if I come back over here, this has now changed as well, and every time I'm making a request, okay, it's recording what is going on, who is making request, that kind of stuff. Function keys, I have not used it too much. Integration is something where you can integrate this particular trigger for something. Say maybe you have a storage account where you are processing video files. Okay, so if somebody uploads a video file, it can create a trigger, and you can connect that input to this particular trigger. You can go through the function where it's going to process your video file, maybe compress it and do something with it, and then maybe save it, and here you can also configure your output. In this lab we are not doing anything like that, but you can also do that kind of stuff with the function app. So let's see if anything else we are missing. I think I have covered pretty much most of the things that I wanted to cover for the function app. So let's go back over here So here we did the testing as well. We did the testing from the URL as well. The request URL includes a key that is required by default to access your function over HTTP. Okay, when your function runs, trace information is written to the logs, and we have looked at the logs as well. And then they're saying, hey, go ahead and clean up your resources and your delete your function app. Okay, so next, one other thing that I wanted to do before I finish this lab is go back to your functions one more time and click on add. So another real easy function to add is the TimerTrigger. It's like very easy. So this function, what it does, it just runs a code at a scheduled time, and this is a cron type your notation or your convention. What you do, enter a cron expression for the format. It's a cron format. So this one is the 5 is for the minute. So if I keep this and create the function, this TimerTrigger function, it will be executed in every 5 minutes. So if I can change that to 1 minute, if I do that, this function will be running in every 1 minute. So I can click on this one, and that is going to create another function for us, and this function is going to be a time based. So the previous function that we created, there you gotta have a HTTP request that should come in before it executes. This one is maybe you have a bad job that you want to run, okay, and you want to run it in every 1 minute for whatever reason. So you can configure that just like that over here. Again, you come down over here, code and test. Okay, possibly you also have this code, sample code. Here you can also test this code, okay, and just say run, and it is now connected, and now here is my log. Okay, so whatever you put in here to do, okay, so that code will be executed in every minute as per this particular function that we have just created. Alright, so I think I have shown you how easy it's to create. What I would recommend that you guys do, come over here to functions, okay, add some more types of functions and maybe play with the code just a little bit more, and then be familiar with what else you can do with the function app. So just remember, function you create inside the function app. Function app is a container for functions, and you can have many different types of functions and whole bunch of default templates. They're available to you. You can develop your code in your local environment, or you can develop your code, you know, using this particular feature over here. Okay, and that's about it. Go through some other stuff. The application insights we didn't cover too much. The application insight will give you a lot of information about how your apps are working, your functions are working, and to do that, just enable your application monitoring. Okay, that's about it. So if you're studying for the exam, just feel free to read through it some more the documentation, be familiar, deploy some function app, and be familiar with this feature. Good luck with the exam if you're studying for the certification. If not, if you like the video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and leave your valuable comments. Have a great day.